Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Connected Table Live. I am your host, David Ransom, and you are listening to the Connected Table on W4CY, and it is also available on iHeartRadio. We had the great pleasure today of coming to you from the wonderful South Texas city of San Antonio, one of the oldest cities in the United States. And at this point, I've been told the seventh largest city in the United States with the growing population every year. It seems to be one of those places that everybody seems to want to flock to these days. And the growing population, it's now 1.4 million, if I'm correct. And really one of the most vibrant scenes in the U.S., I think, at this point. Really a wonderful city to come visit, especially in January, which is where we are now, because it's a little bit warmer than my native New York, so it's always nice to come down here for that. But San Antonio is one of those great cities that's got a lot of history. It's got a lot of culture. It's got a lot of wonderful things going on, and it's got a pretty solid and strong growing culinary community as well, which is where we're going to focus today. And one of probably the top culinary destinations, I think, in San Antonio at this point is the Pearl Brewery Center, which was where Pearl beer was brewed back from the late 1800s up through about the year 2000 before they switched breweries to somewhere else. But then Pearl was taken over by the founder of Pace Salsas. And he then donated that back to the city and created a kind of a culinary and arts and destination center for the city to use. And it's growing and still kind of under construction in some parts, but growing. And there's about 15, 17 restaurants there now, and wonderful cultural things to do. And it's just a great activity center for the city of San Antonio. And I think one of the centerpieces, which is what we're going to talk about today, is a restaurant that opened about a year ago called Cured. And the chef, Steve Mchugh, is our guest today on the show. And welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. We've known each other for a while. Now that we're getting to know each other on air, exactly. We realize that we've actually known each other for quite a while, and we just didn't remember it.
Exactly.
So it's actually kind of fun to have you on the show and talk about a little bit about your career and what moved you from New Orleans, which is where you really started your career, to San Antonio, and then also from your time in San Antonio, what got you to open Cured. But why don't we start a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what got you into cooking, and what inspires you.
Well, I'm an old farm boy from Wisconsin, basically. I grew up in a little town in the southern part of the state, about an hour and a half north of Chicago, and grew up on an old dairy farm. And I really got into kitchens at a really young age, about 14, 15 years old, washing dishes, because I just did not want to work on a farm and wanted to kind of get away. And my parents really encouraged me and all my six brothers to go out and find work and go get jobs at a young age. And, you know, you've heard it before. You hear it all the time when chefs, you know, they get into kitchens and they are surrounded by kind of like-minded individuals, and probably we're not the best students and we weren't always the best in school and struggled, but we get around each other and there's something that we just feed off of. And I've always been like that. I've always been just attracted to kitchens and the people that are in them, and restaurants and the, you know, servers. And, you know, it really takes a certain type of person. And I just never saw myself leaving the kitchen, you know. And it was after high school. I had a failed stint in college. You know, I studied music for a little bit in college, but it wasn't for me. And, you know, it was my father who said, well, why don't you go to culinary school? You know, and growing up in a tiny little town where you didn't even know what a chef was,
right.
and to say culinary school, you know, I never even thought of that as a career. And it was the best advice anybody's ever given me to this day.
And where'd you go?
I went to the CIA in
Hyde
upstate,
Park,
upstate New York.
Yeah. Actually, I'm from the Hudson Valley, so and my wife and I live there now. And actually, most weeks we broadcast our show from there. To be perfectly honest, so it's so you spent some time in my neck of the woods as well.
It's gorgeous up there.
Isn't it beautiful up there?
It
Yeah,
really
the Hudson Valley
is.
is really just one of the most beautiful places in the country.
Yeah.
Not that San Antonio's not, but it's quite a great spot. But so you went to the CIA, yeah, and went through their program, and.
Yeah, it's a wonderful program. I mean, they really break everybody down like you don't know anything, and they bring you up from scratch. And it's really something, because I really didn't know anything when I went there. And as a 19-year-old who, you know, grew up, like I said, in a tiny little town flipping burgers, and you're there with 25, 26, 30-year-olds who have worked at some great places, who are there for the same reason. And so for them to basically show you how to use a knife, I didn't know what a stock was when I went to the CIA, and so I was. And
that's the rage these days, stock. Or they're not calling it stock anymore. They're calling it bone broth.
Yeah, it's broth.
It's broth now, not stock. But which makes me laugh because I always see bone broth, and the chefs in New York are talking about bone broth, and I'm like, oh, you mean stock?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it is all the rage. It makes me laugh when I see that. But you know what? I find people like that are just super smart, that they can find a little niche like that and make money on it.
And spin it.
And spin it, exactly. But the CIA was such an advantage for me to really come from the ground up and learn. And by the time I graduated, I was actually a team leader in my class. I just felt like I was on such an even playing field, even footing as the rest of the people I went to school with. So it was so beneficial for me.
Yeah. And it's an interesting note that you went to the CIA, and the CIA actually has a campus now in San Antonio
exactly.
at the Pearl,
across
the street from your new restaurant, Cured.
Yeah.
So do you go back and do you do teaching and things like that, or do you go back and give seminars and things like that at the CIA?
What I do is
get involved with them.
And I don't, not to give away a little bit about the restaurant too early on, but we purchase whole animals here at the restaurant, and because we do that because it's easier on our farmers. It's easier for us. It gives us a lot of teaching. But the one animal that I can't necessarily do here in the restaurant is the Wagyu beef steers that we purchase and butcher. And so once a month, we actually do those at the CIA, and the students help. And it's really nice because I get to utilize their facilities. We get to spread out, and at the same time, they help me.
And they get to learn.
Yeah, and they learn, and it's free labor for me, so it's great.
That always works out. Helps keep the bottom line down.
Exactly.
Actually, I actually like butchering. I used to hunt a lot when I was a kid, and I always butchered the whole deer from start to finish and things like that when I did it. So it's always kind of been fun for me. So I can understand how and you also then get to know the animal much better, and how you can utilize the pieces and things like that.
Yeah.
And where they come from on the animal and what to do with them.
I wish more butchers were like that, because sometimes you talk to more hunters, I should say, because you talk to a hunter and they bring you 2 legs and 2 loins, and you're asking, well, where's the rest of the animal? It's still out in the woods somewhere,
I know that is kind of sad because a lot of hunters don't think that way. But yeah, I always did, as I say, bullet to table.
Exactly.
Sorry about those listeners that are not quite getting that concept. But anyway, so let's get back to talking about chefing and restaurants and things like that. You worked for a long time in New Orleans.
Yeah.
After school, and you worked for a good friend of ours, John Besh, who owns a number of restaurants and also has a restaurant in San Antonio, Luke, as well. Mm-hmm. You worked for him for a long time and was his chef de cuisine at his flagship restaurant, August, as well, which is a wonderful establishment on Tchoupitoulas in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And so you worked for him for a long time. And then in 2010, when John went to open Luke here in San Antonio, you spearheaded that program.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what the jump was for you, and also a little bit about working in New Orleans, one of my favorite cities, where I got married, and just a great culinary destination of the world, I think, and a wonderful place. I see some of that in the foods that you're making here at Cured. But I'd love to talk about, what New Orleans means to you and then how you made the jump from there to here.
New Orleans really, for me as a chef, means everything to me. It's really basically where I grew up as a chef, I tell people I grew up in Wisconsin, but as a chef, I grew up in New Orleans working for people like John. 10 years with John. I, too, was married in New Orleans. I married a girl from New Orleans, and the hardest thing that anyone can do is take a girl out of New Orleans.
Isn't that the truth, though? They say that people born in New Orleans rarely ever leave. And it's so true.
Yeah, it is true. They just love it so much, and you almost feel like the rest of the world will never compare to that city, especially in their eyes. And there's such a sense of hospitality in that city that
unlike
you don't
any other place in the country.
You don't get it anywhere else. And they really truly they enjoy you. They want you to have a good time. They want you to have a good time. They that's what they do. I mean, they are a tourist-driven economy and a tourist city, and nearly 100% of the population is there to take care of you.
Yeah.
And that's what's so wonderful about it. And to work under somebody like John, who was born and raised there, and gets it and understands it, and would give anything to make sure that every single person in the dining room at every single one of his restaurants has a great time.
And what I love about New Orleans is the fact that when you go to a restaurant in New Orleans, and this is pretty much any restaurant in New Orleans, the owner's always standing out front. The chef walks the dining room.
Yeah.
The team walks the dining room. It's such a caring community, and they're so hospitality is the lifeblood of New Orleans.
Yeah.
So they're so in tune with it. Even anywhere, Commander's Palace. The Brennans just do an incredible
so
job.
many examples.
Lally Ortiz are always in the dining room. It's just it's a great city, and I don't really know of any other city like that kind of takes it to that level and is so welcoming. It is the money for them. So obviously it's that for two reasons. A, because they know that they have to make it special, and B, because they're so good at it. They just love it.
Yeah, and I think that they want everybody to be happy, and that includes the people that work in the restaurants. And I remember at a young age I was working as a butcher at Dickie Brennan's Steakhouse, and Dick Brennan once a week would walk through, and he'd walk through the kitchen, and he'd come into the butcher shop and shake your hand, and how's everything going? And he'd look around and, everything all right this week? And I'd be, yeah, yes, sir. And I'm looking at this man like, he's a god, I mean, he's one of the guys who've put the, restaurants on the scene, and you're just like, I'm doing great. How are you? And I mean, and that's how it is with all of them, Ralph and Dickie, the people I worked for and younger, and even with John for the 10 years I worked for him. I mean, it's just, they want, they're best friends with the dishwashers. They're not above that, and they want everybody to have a good time.
Everybody's family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's a special place. So let's talk a little bit about, when you left New Orleans and came to San Antonio. What was the jump like for you? Was it a difficult transition? Was it an easy transition? I know you threw yourself into opening a restaurant, so obviously there's a lot of work involved there, but it was obviously a big change.
Yeah, it was. There was so much going on. My wife and I, we had decided that, okay, we were going to come to San Antonio, and I was going to help John open this restaurant. And 3 months before we moved is when I had actually started feeling really sick and had been diagnosed with lymphoma. And there was several weeks there where we weren't sure if we were going to actually go, and it kept thinking about it and deciding on it and praying on it and trying to figure out what was going to be the best move for us. And I remember speaking with my doctor at the time there, because I had just started treatment, and I'd probably just had my first chemotherapy, and I was feeling really bad. And I remember talking to my doctor saying, well, I don't think I should do this. I think I should stay here. And I remember him clear as day saying, the last thing that anybody wants you to do is to stop living your life. Right. This is not a death sentence. And the worst thing you can do is to stop living your life. So if you want to move to San Antonio, then move. Yeah. There are doctors there. We'll figure it out. And found a wonderful doctor here who just, basically picked up the ball and kept running with it and finished out my treatments here. And at the same time, opening a restaurant. I think I finished my chemotherapy about a month before the restaurant opened. And so it's funny when people who met me at like our opening party, and then they see me a couple years later and they're like, oh, wow, you have hair. And, you look so different. And they didn't even know I was sick, and it wasn't like it was something that was really advertised. I had a job to do, and it was to get the restaurant open.
Yeah. Did you keep it from people?
I probably did a little bit. It wasn't like, I went around, I'm definitely somebody who enjoys what I do, and I wasn't going to let something like that really hold me back and do the job that I came here to do, and that was to open a restaurant for the great John Besh, who has a wonderful reputation of opening great restaurants and putting out great food and great service. And I wasn't going to let something like that sideline me. So I probably did keep it a little bit. I probably did hide it a little bit. Yeah.
And you came through, obviously, and did a great job opening Luke. And then about a year or so ago, you said it's time to take my next jump, and you opened this wonderful restaurant at the Pearl, Cured.
Yeah.
Which the name is really has a couple of different meanings. Obviously, one of them is it's a double entendre in a way that it has to do with your health and curing yourself of lymphoma, but also one of the main focuses is the fact that you do all your own curing of meat and things like that as well. And you've got a huge charcuterie program here that's all done in-house. And it's a wonderful program. We had a few today at lunch, and they were all fabulous, whether it's a rillette or a sausage or whatever it may be. You do a lardo as well, which is fabulous. One of my favorite things, probably the guiltiest pleasure one can have, is eating lardo, I think.
Exactly.
but it's damn good when you have it.
Right.
But you do all your own curing of meats, and whether it's a local pig that you make a prosciutto out of or a ham, you're doing it all here. And it's kind of a testament to being cured in both ways.
Yeah, and it really is a wonderful outlet for these whole animals that we buy. When we're talking about 300 pounds of pork coming in the back door, it's a daunting task of saying, well, what can we do and not freeze half of this? What can, and the charcuterie and the curing and everything really started coming out of the philosophy of the restaurant. We really wanted to be able to buy that whole lamb and utilize single part of that lamb, whether it's the head or the heart or the legs or the loins, and that case that you see out front gives us the ability to kind of stockpile some things and lets us sit on them and almost let them appreciate in their value and their flavor and their taste, and it really makes our farmers so much more happier because they can just bring us that entire animal, and that was really kind of how that started. The philosophy was, let's not go to the farmer's market and buy pork bellies. Right. Let's go to the farmer's market and just tell that farmer, we'll take one animal a month, or whatever you can provide us. And it's gotten to the point now where we actually go through about 2 or 3 lamb a week, 2 or 3 goat a week. We do a hog every 3 weeks, a whole hog, and then a Wagyu steer about every month and a half. So, it's a lot of meat, but you didn't see any Brazola in the case today, but we usually have it. It goes by really quickly, and it actually, beef cures so much quicker than pork because of the intramuscular fat that's inside the muscle.
Sure. I know something about that a little bit because I actually make my own beef jerky at home. So,
exactly.
So I know that process a little bit, but certainly not on the scale that you do, what you guys do here. It's a very ambitious program. I see a lot of inflection from New Orleans also in your cooking here. So obviously you brought that with you. You've got some, almost a kind of a global reach as well in some of the foods that you have. You've got a poutine, which is a very kind of Canada's national dish, I think they call it.
Exactly.
Right? And it's a wonderful thing with pork cheek in it, or pork jowl. And it's a delicious dish. We had that today as well. But you really have a lot of different things going on in the restaurant. So I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about the menu and what inspires you in that respect as well.
Well, the menu, I just really, for the most part, I want it to be fun and I want it to be honest. I felt for years we started getting away from food just being food, and it started to be how goofy and weird can I make it, and how much weird stuff can I put on a plate and kind of get these people to buy it. And I feel like in the last probably 5 or 6 years we started getting away from that, especially, I really got a great sense of that working for John because he was such a local chef. He really, he believed in it. And
he was really one of the first guys in New Orleans to kind of champion the local aspect of really working with local farmers, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Shrimp and oysters aside, things like that, which we all know, and fish that everybody gets down there. But he was working with the farmers on vegetables and all kinds of things like that. Really, long before any of the other chefs in New Orleans was doing that.
It was really inspiring working for somebody like that because he really challenged you to. Your menu had to change, and as a chef, sometimes you can get a little bit complacent with your menu. You say, "Oh, that's," he'd say, "Well, what's selling really well?" And you'd say, "Oh, the duck or this or that," and he'd say, "Cool, let's take it off." And you'd look at him like, "Well, but the fillet is doing great." And he's like, "Yeah, but I'm tired of it." And you're like, "God, he's right." And the spinach is out of season, and those mushrooms I can no longer get them. I'm getting them flown in from who knows where, and it's like, he's right. It's tired. Let's change it. And so he really pushed you as a young chef, all of us. Here I've got these heirloom tomatoes from the farmer's market. Sure. Change that beet salad, and you're like, oh God, but people love the beet salad. But it's like, no, change it. And he really pushed you to understand the seasons and really push you out of your comfort zone. That was the best part. And so we do that a lot here at the restaurant. And I'm very fortunate because I have a farmer's market that happens every single Saturday in front of my restaurant.
That's right, because there's one of the best farmers markets in the city is actually here at Pearl.
At the Pearl, the Pearl Farmers Market.
You're kind of in luck.
So it's easy for me every Saturday to go out with my cart and just load it up and my sous chefs, they look at me, I'll come back and go, hey, sorry fellas, no
we're working with this today.
Yeah, exactly. No cauliflower, but I did find this. And oh boy, here we go. So I mean, it really, you see a lot of that reflection on the menu. And really, getting back to the honesty of the menu, we just wanted to, how can we take something as simple as a gumbo, but put our little spin on it, our little twist, by taking something that I learned in New Orleans, like a great seafood gumbo, but in turning it into a smoked pork gumbo, and really the flavors of the roux and that beautiful pork stock and the smoked pork meat that goes into that gumbo, it's just a little bit different. It's staying true to that dish that I learned for so many years, but just making it my own. And that's I think really where we kind of end up a lot of times with our menu is just how can we just put a little bit on it so that it's ours, but it's true to that region or dish or wherever it might come from.
Well, and a couple of examples of that as well. I'm going to go through a couple of things for our listeners on the menu. You have, unlike what most people may think happens in Texas, there is a lot of vegetables on the menu.
Yeah.
Although it's a fairly
at a place called Cured.
At a place called Cured, exactly. Not pickled, cured.
Right.
But there's a lot of vegetables on the menu. You've got crab. You've got wonderful fish on the menu from the Gulf. But you also do interesting things with your meats. You do sweetbreads, but it's a buffalo style sweetbreads.
Right.
So you've got that little bit of a twist where you got a little bit of spice and a little ranch dressing or
I'm going to ruin people on sweetbreads.
Are you? I love sweetbreads. They're one of my favorite things in the world. But you eat too many of them, of course, and then it's like
mine too. And I feel like there's a lot of people that come here and say, "I've never had sweetbreads before, but I love them now after eating yours because it's buffalo style."
I remember my mom used to make them when I was growing up, and I before I found out what they were, I loved them, and then I didn't really like them for a little while, and then I got to like them again. And I was in college in Washington, and I went to the supermarkets, and they had a container of sweetbreads that they were selling that day because they had just gotten in a cow and they had taken care of it, and so there were fresh sweetbreads. And I called my mom. I was like, "Mom, how do you make sweetbreads? Because I'm going to make them in my dorm tonight." And she thought I was nuts. But they're definitely one of my favorite things. Really a lot of fun. But you also do a beef tartare with Wagyu beef. You have a bone marrow soup, which is great. The poutine, as I said, mentioned earlier, is one of your kind of your flagship dishes.
It's fun for
me
because
really a lot of fun to eat, and it's got a pickled cauliflower with a little bit of curry, I think, in it, right?
Yeah,
is it?
yeah.
That you do pickled cauliflower that kind of garnishes it as well. You can also do that with a farm egg. Really kind of fun stuff on the menu.
Yeah.
Great fishes, a lot of Gulf influence,
yeah.
But obviously some stuff that's true to Texas as well. So it's kind of an interesting menu and a lot of fun, and I'm sure you have a lot of fun in the kitchen with it, coming up with new stuff all the time.
It's always fun. The poutine for me, especially the cheese curds, take me back to Wisconsin. We grew up eating fried cheese curds, and my mom used to always say, if they don't squeak, they're not right. And,
See, I'm from upstate New York. We don't have much to do with cheese curds, but we have good cheese.
Exactly. But it's so much fun to just kind of, like I said, the market, what's in the walk-in, what we have that week for an animal really helps us dictate what it is we're doing. The butternut squash salad last week was pumpkin salad. It just depends on what we have, and it's always changing. It's this living, breathing thing, and there are our mainstays on the menu. Our burger is always on at lunch, and we have certain charcuterie items that always stay on. But other than that, it's just constantly moving, and people come in all the time, and they say, "Wow, it's so much different last time I was here." And I said, "Well, we want you to keep coming back. We don't want you to get bored and tired.
We don't want you to say, 'Oh, well, we've been there. Let's try something else now.'"
Yeah, exactly.
It kind of gives them a reason not to have to do that.
And we let the kind of that approach also work its way into our drink menu as well. We do some culinary type stuff with our cocktails. We do a lemon and thyme infusion for our moonshine cocktail, which is the cured cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
And, the jalapenos in the starter kit.
I had the starter kit today with lunch, and it was delicious.
Yeah, it's a little wake me up there.
Yeah, a little bit spicy, a little bit yummy, a little citrus in there. It was very nice. Made with Dolce Vita tequila, or pure Dolce Vita tequila, which is a wonderful kind of, or it's actually an organic tequila as well. Mm-hmm. Very good stuff, and created by a Texan as well. Yeah. One of the things that I like about Cured as well is that the fact that you have a pretty good charitable program. Yeah. And there's a couple of dishes on your menu that proceeds from the sale of every one of those dishes goes to a charity. Tell me a little bit about that, and what the concept was for that, and really and how you feel about it.
Well, it really it goes back to kind of this life-changing sickness that I had, and you start to learn more about it, and I'm the kind of person who loves to study, and I start thinking about, how did I get this, and where did it come from, and what did I do wrong, and you start to learn that, there are no causes to blood cancers. There's just a lot of treatments, and so you start learning about the treatments, and I learned about this wonderful group called Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which I'm now a member of, and sit on the board for their local chapter, and I start to realize that they've done so much good in the years prior to when I got sick that really random strangers kind of saved my life, and I'm forever grateful for an organization like that. And so, my wife and I started talking about how can we get involved and how can we do more and be better and really help others. And so we rotate charities every 3 months, and we donate proceeds from our really what we call our cured platters to different charities. And, this is our first year. Last year we donated almost, I don't know the exact numbers, but it was almost 15,000 to 4 different charities last year. And we were really, really happy with that feat, and we'll hope to do more this year. And really, we can't really ever nail it down to exactly what charities we want to do. And so that's why we change it every 3 months and make sure that we really kind of help spread the wealth and kind of appeal to a lot of different people's charitable aspects,
and keeps it fresh.
Yeah, it does
as well. Kind of keeps you interested and involved in a lot of different things.
It does, exactly.
It's a nice way to do it. Well, kudos to that, because
Thank you.
It's a great program. You don't really see it very often. You see people write checks. You see people make a donation or support a cause with their food and things like that. But you really do it at a whole different level because you're doing it with your food at the restaurant.
Yeah.
You're not just going to support an event by having a table at their event as a chef with food. You're doing it every day here at Cured. And it's a nice testament to the philosophy that you have here. So congratulations on that. We only have a minute or so left, and I'd love to kind of get an idea from you in that time that we have, kind of how you see San Antonio growing and what it means to you now that you've been here for a few years, and how the culinary scene's progressing.
It's 5 years I've been here now. It's gone leaps and bounds, and it's amazing. There's a city here that is hungry, that wants more, that believes it can be more, is tired, of people have such a kind of a weird thought process when they think of San Antonio, and then they come here and they're like, wow, what a great city. I mean, earlier on you talked about the history and the culture and that makes San Antonio great, and that's the same reason I fell in love with this city. It reminds me of New Orleans in that aspect in a lot of ways. It doesn't feel like a city that popped up overnight. There's so much terroir in their food and their drink that's hundreds and thousands of years old. So I think really sky's the limit when it comes to that kind of stuff. It's a city that's growing every single day, leaps and bounds. And we're our military city, and so you are surrounded by these people who have lived in other parts of the world that demand great food, and I don't think people see that a lot of times when they see military.
That's actually an interesting point, because I don't think a lot of people do either.
Mm-mm.
You know, they think military and it's fairly insular, and they don't really see a lot of the world that they see.
Right.
But they do.
Oh, they do.
They're into food. They're into drinking. They're into travel.
Travel.
They love it all.
Culture. I meet people all the time.
Into culture.
Oh, I was stationed in New Orleans, and this reminds me of that. I was stationed in Germany, and I haven't had, sauerkraut like this in forever. I was in South Korea, and and these people, I mean, they really do understand great food, and we have a ton of military that come in here and eat every single day and every single night, and we cater to people like that.
Yeah. Well, it's a interesting idea, and obviously a very vibrant idea for the city of San Antonio these days too. Growing restaurant scene, and we've been talking with Steve Mchugh, who has probably one of the most interesting and fascinating restaurants in the city, Cured. And Steve, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so
today,
much.
and having you sit down and connect with us at our table. And you are listening to David Ransom on the Connected Table Live, and we are live in San Antonio, Texas, in January 2015. Steve, thanks so much for coming and spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me. I
appreciate it. Thanks so much. Folks, we'll be back in a little bit, and we look forward to talking with you next week as well. This is David Ransom and the Connected Table Live on W4CY and iHeartRadio. Thanks so much. Take care now.